Welcome to part one of the story of our 2014 cruise in the San Juan Islands of Washington State and the Gulf Islands of British Columbia, Canada, by Steve and Helen Eshelman. 40 days and 40 nights aboard the Albin 25 pocket trawler La Dolce Vita from June 22nd to August 2nd, 2014. Part 1, the San Juans, June 22nd to July 12th. On the road again, going places that I've never been, seeing things that I may never see again, and I can't wait to be on the road again. After months of planning and anticipation, on the morning of June 16th, 2014, we hitched up our 25-foot Albin inboard diesel motor sailor pocket trawler and embarked on a 1,700-mile trailering trip to our launch point at Squalicum Harbor in Bellingham, Washington. We chose to travel to Bellingham via the inland route, driving up Interstate 17 through Flagstaff, Arizona, up U.S. Route 89 and Interstate 15 to Salt Lake City, continuing on the slightly less direct route west along Interstate 84 on through southern Idaho and across western Oregon in order to stop for a short visit along the way with Helen's sister and her husband at their home near Portland. They would later join with us in the San Juan and Gulf Islands with their 25-foot Bayliner cabin cruiser. Here we are en route, camped for our third night on the road in Memaloose State Park campground on the Columbia River next to a highway rest area on Interstate 84, about 70 miles east of Portland in Oregon. We had also camped in the boat for one night near Beaver, Utah, and then booked a hotel room for a night near Twin Falls, Idaho, before arriving at Helen's sister's home in Deer Island, Oregon, about 50 miles from Portland. Meet Helen's favorite baby sister Paula and her husband Alan. Alan is an accomplished amateur homebrewer of craft beer and ale as well as an experienced powerboater. They spend their vacations cruising the San Juans and Gulf Islands almost every year, and their advice and cruising tips were invaluable. There's no mistaking that these two blonde bombshells are sisters. After a 2-day visit with Helen's sister and her husband, we finally arrived at Bellingham on June 22nd, having mostly driven at speeds of around 60 miles per hour to conserve fuel. We picked Bellingham as our launch point over the nearer port of Anacortes for two reasons. First, we were already familiar with Bellingham from a previous charter cruise on board a Jeanneau 41 sailboat from San Juan Sailing with Charles and Sally Harris and Claudia Fornwell, née Jurowski, back in 2011. Second, we had learned that free long-term parking was available for our truck and trailer at Squalicum Harbor in Bellingham. Needless to say, that alone saved us considerable expense. Also, the launch facilities there are first class with a launch fee of only $7.50. Here's Squalicum Harbor launch ramp at the Port of Bellingham, Washington. I know, by now you're thinking, all right, Steve, well, isn't that special? Now how about let's cut to the chase and tell us about the cruise. All right there, mateys, so getting down to business, once on the water, our cruise proceeded in 3 phases. The first phase, covered in part 1, followed the track shown on this map and lasted 20 days from June 22nd to July 12th. And was limited to the San Juan Islands. Second phase, covered in part 2, from July 13th to July 28th was spent cruising the Gulf Islands and Canadian waters, with the third phase, also covered in part 2, being a return to U.S. waters and a few more days in the San Juans before a final return to Bellingham and haul out. The islands visited during this first phase were Lummi, Batia, Susha, Orcas, Jones, Stewart, San Juan, and Lopez, culminating in attending the annual Northwest Albin Owners Group Rendezvous at Roche Harbor on San Juan Island on July 11th and 12th. Paula and Alan also joined us at Roche Harbor with their 25-foot Baylighter sedan cruiser on July 11th. Technically speaking, our Alban 25 is a motor sailor, and we do have a mast and sailing rig for her. But the whole point here is to have a comfortable cruising boat that sips fuel like a sailboat, but avoids the need to step a big heavy mast after a long road trip in order to sail in an area that has mostly light winds in the summer. Sailboats cruising the San Juans at this time of year spend most of their time motoring or motor sailing anyway, and we do cruise along at sailboat speeds of around 6 to 6.5 knots. If we had rigged La Dolce Vita as a sailboat, she would look something like this, but even so, there's no denying it, she's more motorboat than sailboat. So after taking a guest slip in Squalicum Harbor and docking for the night of June 22nd to sort out our provisions and get a little rest after the long road trip, our first stop in the islands was a short 7-mile run over to Inati Bay on nearby Lummi Island to do a little hiking and spend the night of June 23rd at anchor. June 24th dawned fair, and we proceeded north by west on a 14-mile run to Susha Island, with a day stop on the way at nearby Matia Island. Matia is a state park and wildlife refuge that has a public access dock float and loop hiking trails through pristine old-growth forest. Here La Dolce Vita is tied up at the public landing dock in Rolfe Cove on Matia Island. Another view of La Dolce Vita from a different angle while tied up at the floating dock in Rolfe Cove. Here is a view from Rolfe Cove on Matia, looking west towards Susha Island. Next stop was Fossil Bay on Susha Island, where we anchored for 3 nights, June 24th, 25th, and 26th. The last time we cruised in the San Juans, we had anchored in Echo Bay, the other main anchorage on Susha. That's us, the small boat at anchor in the background. Anchored in Fossil Bay, 35 to 40 footers or bigger seemed to be the norm. Everywhere we went, we were almost always one of the smallest boats in the anchorage. Note the calm waters. We anchored for free most nights rather than pay the $12 a night for moorings or the $1 a foot tie-up fee at the dock. Another view of Fossil Bay on a calm morning. And another view of Fossil Bay. Beautiful place. And a beautiful wife in a beautiful forest. And smooth as glass in Fossil Bay. And here we're barbecuing steak kebabs on the grill in Fossil Bay. Next we headed for Deer Harbor Marina on Orcas Island on June 27th. This was our first chance to refill our water tank, pump out our marine head holding tank, catch up on laundry, and have some fish and chips for lunch. Also, the first night in a marina in the islands. And here's a picture of Deer Harbor Marina. June 28th, next stop, Reed Harbor on Stewart Island, with a short day stop on the way at Jones Island State Park. Here's a map of Jones Island State Park with the dashed lines showing hiking trails. The anchorage where we stopped was that inlet at the south end of the island. Here we were anchored just for a day stop. We didn't stay overnight here. And going ashore for a hike in the harbor. Jones Island Park had some really nice trails through all this old growth, almost a rainforest. Beautiful place. For the next 3 nights, June 28th, 29th, and 30th, we stayed anchored in Reed Harbor. Unlike our previous 7-day charter cruise in 2011, our schedule this time was open-ended and we could stay for as long as we liked at any one place. The only firm scheduled date was to be in Roche Harbor by July 11th for the Albin Owners event. This gave us a chance to do a lot more hiking and exploring, including a strenuous hike out to Turn Point Lighthouse. Along the way, we met a Canadian family and were invited to dinghy over to their boat, a C&C 32 sailboat, hang out and chat over wine and hors d'oeuvres. In the process, we picked up some good tips on where to go in the Canadian Gulf Islands. Throughout the cruise, this hardshell dinghy that came with the boat was indispensable. We already had the 2.5 horsepower Tohatsu outboard, so in addition to rowing oars, this meant we could easily get to shore from any anchorage, no matter how far out and back from the dock or beach. While underway, it stows on snap davits attached to the swim platform. And Helen enjoyed getting out and rowing about in the dinghy. On occasion, we'd even spot deer in the forest while hiking. The majority of our days on this cruise were clear and sunny. At times, we could clearly see magnificent views of snow-capped Mount Baker in the distance, looking back toward the mainland. Notice how calm the water is, the reason why sailboats end up motoring so much of the time. Stewart Island has its own K-8 one-room schoolhouse, which one passes by on the road to Turn Point Light. The larger building on the right is the original old schoolhouse built in 1904, which today serves as the school library. The smaller building on the left was a teacher's residence cottage and now houses an exhibit of island history. The new schoolhouse on the same grounds was built by local labor in 1980 and is still in operation. All K-8 students living full-time on the island are taught in the same large room. High school students living on Stewart Island commute by boat to Friday Harbor. A mile or so up the road from the school is the Turn Point Light Station. Except for an automated fog signal maintained by the Coast Guard, the old light and buildings are managed by the BLM. And the sign reads, in 1875, the United States government reserved this land for the construction of a lighthouse. The signal building, keeper's quarters, and barn were completed in 1893. Lighthouse service 1893 to 1939, and U.S. Coast Guard 1939 to 1974 personnel lived and worked on this headline for 81 years until the signal was automated in 1974. In 1991, these properties, with the exception of the fog signal building and signal, reverted to the Bureau of Land Management. Turn Point is so called because it lies near the apex of a dogleg angle on the U.S.-Canadian border where Boundary Pass meets Harrow Strait. To the west of the Great Lakes, to the Strait of Georgia on the Pacific coast, the northern boundary of the U.S. is the 49th parallel. South of the 49th parallel from the Strait of Georgia to the Strait of Juan de Fuca, Boundary Pass and Harrow Strait mark the boundary and divide Vancouver Island and the Gulf Islands of Canada from the Olympic Peninsula and the San Juan Islands of the USA. Our Canadian hiking buddies with their large poodle dogs on the hike up to Turnpoint Light. When you look out over Boundary Pass from Turnpoint Light Station, you are seeing the dividing line between the US and Canada, with Moresby Island in the Canadian Gulf Islands and Vancouver Island out in the distance. Here's the former lighthouse keeper's residence. Your tax dollars at work. Behold the most luxurious outhouse pit toilet in the world, brought to you by the Bureau of Land Management. Here, as you can see, very sumptuous, but it's just a pit toilet. From La Dolce Vita's cruising log, dated July 1st, 2014, 0830 Pacific Daylight, weighed anchor, pumped the holding tank at Reed Harbor, pump out raft, motored out of Reed Harbor to San Juan Channel via the north side of Speeden Island. Adverse tide currents slowed the speed over ground to 5 knots or less. Once in San Juan Channel, a building ebb tide current boosted the speed over ground to 7 knots and over. Arrived at Friday Harbor at 10 a.m., docked at the 4-hour free courtesy dock at Friday Harbor Marina, had lunch, shopped for provisions at King's Market Grocery, refueled with 4.6 gallons of diesel, departed Friday Harbor at 2:30 p.m., bound for Fisherman's Bay on Lopez Island, a 4 nautical mile crossing over to the narrow, shallow harbor entrance channel. Anchored in 9 feet of water at low tide, rising to 16 feet of water at high tide. We remained at anchor in Fisherman's Bay for the remainder of the week through Saturday, July 5th. And you can see here our track leaving Stewart Island on the upper left and down through to Friday Harbor on the east side of San Juan Island and across the channel over to Fisherman's Bay on Lopez. Here's the port of Friday Harbor on San Juan Island. It's just a small town. Lopez Island is the third largest and one of the more populated islands in the San Juans, with ferry service to a landing at the northern tip of the island. From the marina landings at Fisherman's Bay, it's a 1.5-mile walk to Lopez Village, where there are restaurants, grocery, shopping, and a town library with free internet access. There are 2 marinas on Fisherman's Bay, the Lopez Islander Resort Marina and the Islands Marine Center Marina with a full-service chandlery. The IMC Marina has pump-out facilities, pay showers, ice, and a fully stocked store similar to a West Marine. The highlight of our stay was the 4th of July celebrations, including a parade in the village during the day and a spectacular fireworks display on the bay that night. Here's Fisherman's Bay looking out toward the Islander Resort Marina from our anchorage. And then late afternoon in Fisherman's Bay, looking west toward the upper end of the bay. And a sunset on Fisherman's Bay. Fourth of July got pretty crazy in Fisherman's Bay. Upward of 100 or more boats of all sizes and types filled the anchorage. Due to the long summer days and late sunsets at that latitude, the fireworks weren't scheduled to start until 10:30 p.m. So all afternoon, the enthusiasm built with everyone in a party mode, like this fellow buzzing around the harbor in his dinghy.
And so they're representing kind of negative on the television and in popular culture, and that can transfer over.
He's living the life, I guess. He's going to that party boat. What do you bet? No?
It was a long wait until the fireworks show started at 10:30, but the results were well worth the wait. The following video clip is just the finale, which came after a solid half hour of continuous amazing fireworks. This video barely conveys what it's like to be there in person. The reflections off the water and the thunderous reports echoing off the hills made for a memorable experience, with the rocket's red glare and the bombs bursting in air. By the time we were ready to leave Fisherman Bay on Sunday, July 6th, we were in desperate need of pumping out our holding tank. But the IMC Marina, the only one of the two marinas in Fisherman's Bay with pump out facilities, was closed on Sundays. So we headed over to West Sound on Orcas to the marina which did have a pump out. Once there in West Sound, we had our tank pumped out at the marina, and we got an invitation from a member of the Orcas Island Yacht Club to tie up at their dock overnight for free. The fuel and pump out dock at the West Sound Marina on Orcas. West Sound Marina is a small mom and pop operation, and here you can see the extreme tide range, sometimes as much as 7 foot between low to high, sometimes even 9 feet from low to high if it's a spring tide. After a night in West Sound, we motored down Harney Channel and across to Blind Bay on Lopez and anchored nearby to the ferry landing, where there was a small convenience store, and so we treated ourselves to some ice cream. For the next 3 days, we were laid up with a serious engine problem. On attempting to leave Blind Bay on the morning of July 8th, the high coolant temperature alarm sounded on the instrument panel of our Yanmar engine. We were forced to return to Blind Bay using the dinghy to push the boat back into the bay, where we anchored in 34 feet of water. Inspection of the engine revealed that the raw water pump, which supplies cooling water to the freshwater heat exchanger, had seized up and the pump was ruined. Luckily, West Sound Marina was also a Yanmar dealer and was a short ferry ride away from Lopez. They ordered a new pump which arrived by UPS the next day, but then it turned out to be the wrong pump. Checking by phone with another parts dealer in Bellingham, they confirmed that the pump we got from West Sound was the wrong one and that they did have the right one in stock. Problem was, it would take 2 or 3 more days to have it sent to Lopez Island, and we were due in Roche Harbor by the 11th. Our only other option was to leave our boat in Blind Bay, take the ferry over to Anacortes, rent a car, drive up to Bellingham to get the part, since there is no direct ferry service to Bellingham from any of the islands. So on Wednesday, July 9th, we moved the boat onto a state park mooring buoy, and on Thursday morning, July 10th, took the ferry from Lopez Landing back to Anacortes and ran up to Bellingham to get our part. By 4 p.m., we were back to the boat, installed the pump, and back in business. We had already reserved a guest slip for 2 nights in Roche Harbor for July 11th and 12th in a section set aside for the Albin Owners event. So once the new pump was installed, we headed back to West Sound Marina to return that wrong pump for refund, and then went on to Friday Harbor for more provisions and a stop at my Wells Fargo bank and do a couple loads of laundry. We arrived at Roche Harbor, the last stop on this first phase of the cruise, by 5 p.m. and settled into our guest slip. And here we are with our boat tied up in the Roche Harbor, on the Roche Harbor guest dock. There were a number of other Albin boats in attendance, about 11 in all, I believe, including this Albin 27 center cockpit boat at left, which is the next size larger model up from the 25 and is not a motor sailor. Only one other Albin 25 Lock R showed up, which was this one named Transitions, owned by some folks from Canada. The others were all larger trawlers and sport fishers, 28s, 31s, and 35s. Here are the 2 Albin 25s, the Canadians on the left and our La Dolce Vita on the right. The main event for the Albin group was a continental breakfast served on Saturday morning, July 12th, and a catered barbecue dinner that evening. We met a few interesting people, but since only one other boat was the same type as ours, overall the event was a little bit disappointing. The day before, on the 11th, Helen's sister Paula and her husband Alan showed up, and we had dinner together with them at the Lime Kiln Cafe near the marina. The historic Hotel de Haro in Roche Harbor, one of the town's major landmarks. And thus ended part 1 of our cruise on July 12th. The following day, it was on to Sydney on Vancouver Island, British Columbia, with Paula and Alan, to spend the next 2 weeks cruising among the Gulf Islands of British Columbia. Before leaving Roche Harbor, we refueled for the second time in 3 weeks, taking on 6 gallons of diesel to top off our 20-gallon tank. To be continued in part 2, where you'll see more of our adventures in the Gulf Islands. I'll return to the San Juans and a chance to meet up with fellow Lake Pleasant Sailing Club members Ken and Jennifer Lee in Garrison Bay on San Juan Island, along with video footage of our encounter with a pod of orcas in Haro Strait.